Day 3. Wildfire. 12. The conference. Time to wake up, sir. Mark Hall opened his eyes. The room was lit with a steady pale fluorescent light. He blinked and rolled over on his stomach. Time to wake up, sir. It was a beautiful female voice, soft and seductive. He sat up in bed and looked around the room. He was alone. Hello. Time to wake up, sir. Who are you? Time to wake up, sir. He reached over and pushed a button on the nightstand by his bed. A light went off. He waited for the voice again, but it did not speak. It was, he thought, a hell of an effective way to wake a man up. As he slipped into his clothes, he wondered how it worked. It was not a simple tape, because it worked as a response of some sort. The message was repeated only when Hall spoke. To test his theory, he pushed the nightstand button again. The voice said softly, "Do you wish something, sir? I'd like to know your name, please." "Will that be all, sir?" "Yes, I believe so." "Will that be all, sir?" He waited. The light clicked off. He slipped into his shoes and was about to leave when a male voice said, "This is the answering service supervisor, Dr. Hall. I wish you would treat the project more seriously." Hall laughed. So the voice responded to comments and taped his replies. It was a clever system. "Sorry," he said. "I wasn't sure how the thing worked." The voice was quite luscious. "The voice," said the supervisor heavily, "belongs to Miss Gladys Stevens, who is 63 years old. She lives in Omaha and makes her living taping messages for SAC, Cruise, and other voice reminder systems." "Oh," Hall said. He left the room and walked down the corridor to the cafeteria. As he walked, he began to understand why submarine designers had been called in to plan Wildfire. Without his wristwatch, he had no idea of the time, or even whether it was night or day. He found himself wondering whether the cafeteria would be crowded, wondering whether it was dinner time or breakfast time. As it turned out, the cafeteria was almost deserted. Leavitt was there. He says the others were in the conference room. He pushed a glass of dark brown liquid over to Hall and suggested he have breakfast. "What's this?" Hall said. 42.5 nutrients. It's everything needed to sustain the average 70-kilogram man for 18 hours. Hall drank the liquid, which was syrupy and artificially flavored to taste like orange juice. It was a strange sensation, drinking brown orange juice, but not bad after the initial shock. Leavitt explained that it had been developed for the astronauts, and that it contained everything except air-soluble vitamins. "For that, you need this pill," he said. Hall swallowed the pill, then got himself a cup of coffee from a dispenser in the corner. "Any sugar?" Leavitt shook his head. "No sugar anywhere here. Nothing that might provide a bacterial growth medium. From now on, we're all on high-protein diets. We'll make all the sugar we need from the protein breakdown. But we won't be getting any sugar into the gut. Quite the opposite. He reached into his pocket. Oh no. Yes, David said. He gave him a small capsule, sealed in aluminum foil. No, Hall said. Everyone else has them. Broad spectrum, stop by your room and insert it before you go into the final decontamination procedures. I don't mind ducking myself in all those foul baths, Hall said. I don't mind being irradiated. But I'll be goddamned. The idea, Levitt said, is that you will be as nearly sterile as possible on level 5. We have sterilized your skin and mucous membranes of the respiratory tract as best we can. But we haven't done a thing about the GI tract yet. Yes, Hall said. But suppositories? You'll get used to it. We're all taking them for the first 4 days. Not, of course, that they'll do any good, he said, with a familiar wry, pessimistic look on his face. He stood. Let's go to the conference room. Stone wants to talk about Kopp. Who? Rudolf Kopp. Rudolf Kopp was a Hungarian-born biochemist who came to the United States from England in 1951. He obtained a position at the University of Michigan and worked steadily and quietly for 5 years. Then, at the suggestion of colleagues at the Ann Arbor Observatory, Kopp began to investigate meteorites with the intent of determining whether they harbored life or showed evidence of having done so in the past. He took the proposal quite seriously and worked with diligence, writing no papers on the subject until the early 1960s, when Kelvin and Vaughan and Nagy and others were writing explosive papers on similar subjects. The arguments and counter-arguments were complex, but boiled down to a simple substrate. Whenever a worker would announce that he had found a fossil, or a proteinaceally hydrocarbon, or other indications of life within a meteorite, the critics would claim sloppy lab technique and a contamination with Earth origin matter and organisms. Kopp, with his careful, slow techniques, was determined to end the arguments once and for all. He announced that he had taken great pains to avoid contamination. Each meteorite he examined had been washed in 12 solutions, including peroxide, iodine, hypertonic saline, and dilute acids. It was then exposed to intense ultraviolet light for a period of 2 days. Finally, it was submerged in a germicidal solution and placed in a germ-free, sterile isolation chamber. Further work was done within the chamber. Kopp, upon breaking open his meteorites, was able to isolate bacteria. He found that they were ring-shaped organisms, rather like a tiny undulating inner tube, and he found that they could grow and multiply. He claimed that, while they were essentially similar to earthly bacteria in structure, being based upon proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids, they had no cell nucleus, and therefore their manner of propagation was a mystery. Kopp presented his information in his usual quiet, unsensational manner. and hoped for a good reception. He did not receive one. Instead, he was laughed down by the Seventh Conference of Astrophysics and Geophysics, meeting in London in 1961. He became discouraged and set his work with meteorites aside. The organisms were later destroyed in an accidental laboratory explosion on the night of June 27, 1963. Kopp's experience was almost identical to that of Nagy and the others. Scientists in the 1960s were not willing to entertain notions of life existing in meteorites. All evidence presented was discounted, dismissed, and ignored. A handful of people in a dozen countries remained intrigued, however. One of them was Jeremy Stone. Another was Peter Leavitt. It was Leavitt who, some years before, had formulated the Rule of 48. The Rule of 48 was intended as a humorous reminder to scientists and referred to the massive literature collected in the late 1940s and the 1950s concerning the human chromosomes number. For years, it was stated that men had 48 chromosomes in their cells. There were pictures to prove it, and any number of careful studies. In 1953, a group of American researchers announced to the world that the human chromosome number was 46. Once more, there was pictures to prove it, and studies to confirm it. But these researchers also went back to re-examine the old pictures and the old studies, and found only 46 chromosomes, not 48. Leavitt's Rule of 48 said simply, all scientists are blind, and Leavitt had invoked his rule when he saw the reception Kopp and others received. Leavitt went over the reports and the papers and found no reason to reject the meteorite studies out of hand. Many of the experiments were careful, well-reasoned, and compelling. He remembered this when he and the other wildfire planners drew up the study known as the Vector 3. Along with the Toxic 5, it formed one of the firm theoretical bases for wildfire. The Vector 3 was a report that considered a crucial question. If a bacterium invaded the Earth, causing a new disease, where would that bacterium come from? After consultation with astronomers and evolutionary theories, the wildfire group concluded that bacteria could come from three sources. The first was the most obvious, an organism from another planet or galaxy, which had the protection to survive the extremes of temperature and vacuum that existed in space. There was no doubt that organisms could survive. There was, for instance, a class of bacteria known as thermophilic that thrived on extreme heat, multiplying enthusiastically in temperatures as high as 70 degrees Celsius. Further, it was known that bacteria had been recovered from Egyptian tombs, where they had been sealed for thousands of years. These bacteria were still viable. The secret lay in the bacteria's ability to form spores, molding a hard calcific shell around themselves. This shell enabled the organisms to survive freezing or boiling, and if necessary, thousands of years without food. It combined all the advantages of a spacesuit with those of suspended animation. There was no doubt that a spore could travel through space. But was another planet or galaxy the most likely source of contamination for the Earth? Yeah, the answer was no. The most likely source was the closest source, the Earth itself. The report suggested that bacteria could have left the surface of the Earth eons ago, when life was just beginning to emerge from the oceans and the hot, baked continents. Such bacteria would depart before the fishes, before the primitive mammals, long before the first ape man. The bacteria would head up into the air and slowly ascend until they were literally in space. Once there, they might evolve into unusual forms, perhaps even learning to derive energy for life directly from the sun instead of requiring food as an energy source. These organisms might also be capable of direct conversions of energy to matter. Levitt himself suggested the analogy of the upper atmosphere and the depths of the sea as equally inhospitable environments, but equally viable. In the deepest, blackest regions of the oceans, where oxygenation was poor, and where light never reached, life forms were known to exist in abundance. Why not also in the far reaches of the atmosphere? True, oxygen was scarce. True, food hardly existed. But if creatures could live miles beneath the surface, why could they not also live 5 miles above it? And if there were organisms out there, and if they had departed from the baking crust of the earth long before the first men appeared, then they would be foreign to man. No immunity, no adaptation, no antibodies would have been developed. They would be primitive aliens to modern man, in the same way that the shark, a primitive fish unchanged for 100 million years, was alien and dangerous to modern man, invading the oceans for the first time. The third source of contaminations, the third of the factors, was at the same time the most likely and the most troublesome. This was contemporary Earth organisms taken into space by inadequately sterilized spacecraft. Once in space, the organisms would be exposed to harsh radiation, weightlessness, and other environmental forces that might exert a mutagenic effect, altering the organisms, so that when they came down, they would be different. Take up a harmless bacteria such as the organisms that causes pimples or sore throats, and bring it back in a new form, virulent and unexpected. It might do anything. It might show a preference for the aqueous humor of the inner eye and invade the eyeball. It might thrive on the acid secretions of the stomach. It might multiply on the small currents of electricity afforded by the human brain itself, drive men mad. This whole idea of mutated bacteria seemed far-fetched and unlikely to the wildfire people. It is ironic that this should be the case, particularly in view of what happened to the Andromeda strain. But the wildfire team staunchly ignored both the evidence of their own experience, that bacteria mutate rapidly and radically, and the evidence of the biosatellite test, in which a series of Earth forms were sent into space and later recovered. Biosatellite, too, contained, among other things, several species of bacteria. It was later reported that the bacteria had reproduced at a rate 20 to 30 times normal. The reasons were still unclear, but the results unequivocal. Space could affect reproductions and growth. And yet, no one in Wildfire paid attention to this fact until it was too late. Stone reviewed the information quickly, then handed each of them a cardboard file. These files, he said, contains a transcript of autoclock records of the entire flight of Scoop 7. Our purpose in reviewing the transcript is to determine, if possible, what happened to the satellite while it was in orbit. Hall said, "Something happened to it," Leavitt explained. The satellite was scheduled for a 6-day orbit, since the probability of collecting organisms is proportional to time in orbit. After launch, it was in stable orbit. Then on the second day, it went out of orbit. Hall nodded. "Start," Stone said, with the first page. Hall opened his file. Autoclock transcript, Project Scoop 7, launch date. Abridged version, full transcript stored Vault 179-99. VDBG Complex Epsilon. Hours, minutes, X procedures, T minus time, 00020105. Vandenberg's Launchpad Block 9, Scoop Mission, Control, Reports, System checked on schedule, Scoop MC. Holds for fuel check reported from Group Control, 00013952. Stop clock. Stop clock real time lost 12 minutes. 00013952. Count resumed. Clock connected. 00004112. Scoop MC holds 20 seconds for Launchpad Block 9 check. Clock not stopped for built-in hold. 0003000. Gantry removed. 0002400. Final craft system checked. 00001900. Final capsule systems checked. 0001300. Final systems checks read as negative. 00000712. Cable decoupling. 00000107. Startlink decoupling. 00000005. Ignition. 00000004. Launchpad Block 9 clears all systems. 0000000. Core clamps release. Launch. T plus time. 00000006. Stable. Speed 6 FPS. Smooth EV approach. 00000009. Tracking reported. 00000011. Tracking confirmed. 00000027. Capsule monitors at G1919. Equipment check clear. 00000100. Launch Block 9 clears rocket and capsule systems for orbit. "No point in dwelling on this," Stone said. "It is the record of a perfect launch. There's nothing here. In fact, Nothing for the next 96 hours of flight to indicate any difficulty on board the spacecraft. Now turn to page 10. They all turned. Track transcript continued. Scoop 7 launch date abridged version. As minute second procedure. 00% 1012. Orbital check stable as reported by Grand Bahama Station. 0096. 3419. Orbital check stable as reported by Sydney. 0096 4734. Orbital check stable as reported by VDBG. 0097 0412. Orbital check stable but system malfunction reported by Kennedy Station. 0097 0518. Malfunction confirmed. 0097 0722. Malfunctions confirmed by Grand Bahama computer reports. Orbital instability. 0097 3454. Sydney reports orbital instability. 0097 3902. Vandenberg computations indicated orbital decay. 0098 2714. Vandenberg Scoop Mission Control orders radio re-entry. 0099 1256. Re-entry code transmitted. 0099 1313. Houston reports initiation of re-entry. Stabilize flight path. What about voice communication duration? The critical period. There were link-ups between Sydney, Kennedy, and Grand Bahama, all routed through Houston. Houston had the big computer as well, but in this instance, Houston was just helping out. All decisions came from Scoop Mission Control in Vandenberg. We have the voice communications at the back of the file. It's quite revealing. Transcript of voice communications, Scoop Mission Control, Vandenberg, AFB. Hours 009659 to 009739. This is a classified transcript. It has not been abridged or edited. Hours, minute, second communications. 009659 second 00. Hello Kennedy, this is Scoop Mission Control. At the end of 96 hours of flight time, we have stable orbits from all stations. Do you confirm? 0097 hours. I think we do, Scoop. Our check is going through now. Hold this line open for a few minutes, fellows. 0097 0331. Hello, Scoop MC. This is Kennedy. We have a stable orbit confirmation for you on the last pass-by. Sorry about the delay, but there is an instrument snag somewhere here. 0097 0334. Kennedy, please clarify, is your snag on the ground or aloft? 0097 0339. I am sorry, we have no tracer yet. We think it is on the ground. 0097 0412. Hello, Scoop MC. This is Kennedy. We have a preliminary report of system malfunctions aboard. Our minute-second communications. Your spacecraft repeat. We have a preliminary report of malfunction in the air. Awaiting confirmation. 0097 0415. Kennedy, please clarify system involved. 0097 0418. I'm sorry, they haven't given me that. I assume they are waiting for final confirmation of the malfunctions. 00970421. Does your orbital check as stable still hold? 00970422. Vandenberg, we have confirmed your orbital check as stable. Repeat, the orbit is stable. 00970518. Vandenberg, I am afraid we are also confirmed readings consistent with system malfunctions on board your spacecraft. These include the stationary rotor elements and spanner units going to Mach 12. I repeat, Mach 12. 00970530. Have you run consistencies check on your computers? 00970535. Sorry fellows, but our computers check out. We read it as a real malfunction. 00970545. Hello Houston, open the line to Sydney. Will you? We want confirmation of data. 00970551. Scoop Mission Control, this is Sydney Station. We confirmed our last reading. There was nothing wrong with the spacecraft on its last pass by here. 00970612. Our computer check indicates no systems malfunctions and good orbital stability on summited. Data, we question Kennedy. Ground instrument failure. 00970618. This is Kennedy, Scoop MC. We have run repeat checkouts at this end. Our reading of system malfunctions remains. Have you got something from Bahama? 00970623. Negative, Kennedy, standing by. 00970636. Houston, this is Scoop MC. Can your projection group give us anything? 00970646. Scoop, at this time, we cannot. Our computers have insufficient data. They still read stable orbit with all systems going. 00970722. Scoop MC, this is Grand Bahama Station. We report pass-by of your craft Scoop 7 according to schedule. Preliminary radar fixes were normal, with questions of increased transit time. Please hold for system telemetry. 00970725. Holding Grand Bahama. 00970729. Scoop MC, we are sorry to say we confirm Kennedy observations. We repeat, we confirm Kennedy observations of system malfunctions. Our data are on the trunk to Houston. Can they be routed to you as well? 00970734. No, we will wait for Houston's printout. They have larger predictive banking units. 00970736. Scoop MC Houston has the Bahama data. It is going through the DISPAR program. Give us 10 seconds. 00970747. Scoop MC, this is Houston. The DISPAR program confirms systems malfunctions. Your vehicle is now in unstable orbit with increased transit time of 0.3 seconds per unit of arc. We are analyzing orbital parameters at this time. Is there anything further you wish as interpreted data? 00970759. No, Houston. Sounds like you're doing beautifully. 00970810. Sorry, Scoop. Bad break. 00970818. Get us the decay ratios as soon as possible. Command wishes to make decisions on instrumentation takedown within the next 2 orbits. 00970832. Understand, Scoop. Our condolences here. 00971135. Scoop. Houston Projections Group has confirmed orbital instability, and decay ratios are now being passed by the data trunk to your station. 00971144. How do they look, Houston? 00971151. Bad. 00971159. Not understood. Please repeat. 00971207. Bad. B as in broken. A as in awful. D as in dropping. 00971215. Houston, do you have a causation that satellite has been in excellent orbit for nearly 100 hours? What happened to it? 00971229. Beats us. We wonder about a collision. There is a good rubble component to the new orbit. 00971244. Houston, our computers are working through the transmitted data. We agree a collision. Have you guys got something in the neighborhood? 00971301. Air Force Skywatch confirms our report that we have nothing around your baby, Scoop. 00971350. Houston, our computers are reading this is a random event. Probability is greater than 0.79. 00971500. We can add nothing. Looks reasonable. Are you going to bring it down? 00971515. We are holding on that decision, Houston. We will notify as soon as it is made. 00971754. Houston, our command group has raised the questions of whether the blank 00971759. Reply from Houston's deleted. 00971843. Scoop Crowley to Houston deleted. 00971903. Reply from Houston deleted. 00971911. Agree, Houston. We will make our decisions as soon as we have final confirmation of orbital shutdown from Sydney. Is this acceptable? 00971950. Perfectly, Scoop. We are standing by. 00972432. Houston, we are pre-working our data and no longer consider that redacted is likely. 00972439. Roger, Scoop. 00972913. Houston, we are standing by for Sydney. 00973454. Scoop Mission Control, this is Sydney Station. We have just followed the pass-by of your vehicle. Our initial readings confirms a prolonged transit time. It is quite striking at this time. 00973512. Thank you, Sydney. 00973522. Bit of nasty luck, Scoop. Sorry. 00973902. This is Scoop Mission Control. To all stations, our computers have just calculated the orbital decay for the vehicle, and we find it to be coming down as a +4. Stand by for the final decisions as to when we will bring it down. Hall said, what about the deleted passages? Major Mancheck at Vandenberg told me, Stone said, that they had to do with the Russian craft in the area. The two stations eventually concluded that the Russians had not either accidentally or purposely brought down the Scoop satellite. No one has since suggested differently. They nodded. It's tempting, Stone said. The Air Force maintains a watchdog facility in Kentucky that tracks all satellites in Earth orbit. It has a dual function, both to follow old satellites known to be in orbit and to track new ones. There are 12 satellites in orbit at this time that cannot be accounted for. In other words, they are not ours and are not the result of announced Soviet launches. It is thought that some of these represent navigation satellites for Soviet submarines. Others are presumed to be spy satellites. But the important thing is that, Russian or not, there are a hell of a lot of satellites up there. As of last Friday, the Air Force reported 587 orbiting bodies around the Earth. This includes some old non-functioning satellites from the American Explorer series and the Russian Sputnik series. It also includes boosters and final stages. Anything in stable orbit large enough to reflect back a radar beam. That's a lot of satellites. Yes, and there are probably many more. The Air Force thinks there is a lot of junk out there. Nuts, bolts, scraps of metal, all in more or less stable orbit. No orbit, as you know, is completely stable, without frequent corrections. Any satellite will eventually decay out and spiral down to Earth, burning up in the atmosphere. But that may be years, even decades after the launch. In any event, the Air Force estimates that the total number of individual orbiting objects could be anything up to 75,000. So a collision with a piece of junk is possible. Yes, possible. How about a meteor? That is the other possibility, and the one Vandenberg favors. A random event, most likely a meteor. Any showers these days? None, apparently. But that does not rule out a meteor collision. Levitt cleared his throat. There is still another possibility. Stone frowned. He knew that Levitt was imaginative, and that this trait was both a strength and a defect. At times, Levitt could be startling and exciting. At others, merely irritating. It's rather far-fetched, Stone said, to postulate debris from some extragalactic source other than... I agree, Levitt said. Hopelessly far-fetched. No evidence for it whatever. But I don't think we can afford to ignore the possibility. A gong sounded softly. A lush female voice, which Hall now recognized as that old Gladys Stevens of Omaha, said softly, "You may proceed to the next level, gentlemen." 13. Level 5. Level 5 was painted a quiet shade of blue, and they all wore blue uniforms. Burton showed Hall around. "This floor," he said, "is like all the others. It's circular, arranged in a series of concentric circles, actually. We're on the outer perimeter now. This is where we live and work. Cafeteria, sleeping rooms. Everything is out here. Just inside is a ring of laboratories, and inside that, sealed off from us, is the central core. That's where the satellite and the two people are now. But they're sealed off from us, yes. Then how do we get to them?" "Have you ever used a glove box?" Burton asked. Hall shook his head. Burton explained that glove boxes were large clear plastic boxes used to handle sterile materials. The boxes had holes cut in the sides and gloves attached with an airtight seal. To handle the contents, you slipped your hands into the gloves and reached into the box, but your fingers never touched the material, only the gloves. "We've gone one step further," Button said. "We have whole rooms that are nothing more than glorified glove boxes. Instead of a glove for your hand, there's a whole plastic suit for your entire body." "You'll see what I mean." They walked down the curved corridor to a room marked Central Control. Levitt and Stone were there, working quietly. Central Control was a cramped room, stuffed with electronic equipment. One wall was glass, allowing the workers to look into the adjacent room. Through the glass, Hall saw mechanical hands moving the capsules to a table and setting it down. Hall, who had never seen a capsule before, watched with interest. It was smaller than he had imagined, no more than a yard long. One end was seared and blackened from the heat of re-entry. The mechanical hands under Stone's directions opened the little scoop-shaped true in the side of the capsules to expose the interior. "There," Stone said, taking his hands from the controls. The controls looked like a pair of brass knuckles. The operator slipped his own hands into them and moved his hands as he wanted the mechanical hands to move. "Our next step," he said, "is to determine whether there is still anything in the capsule which is biologically active. Suggestions." "A rat," Levitt said. "Use a black nori." The black nori rat was not black at all. The name simply designated a strain of laboratory animal, perhaps the most famous strain in all science. Once, of course, it had been both black and Norwegian, but years of breeding and countless generations had made it right. Small and docile, the biological explosions had created a demand for genetically uniform animals. In the last 30 years, more than 1,000 strains of pure animals had been evolved artificially. In the case of the black Norwegian, it was now possible for a scientist anywhere in the world to conduct experiments using this animal, and be assured that other scientists elsewhere could repeat or enlarge upon his work using virtually identical organisms. Follow with a recess, Button said. "We will want to get our primates sooner or later." The others nodded. Wildfire was prepared to conduct experiments with monkeys and apes, as well as smaller, cheaper animals. A monkey was exceedingly difficult to work with. The little primates were hostile, quick, intelligent. Among scientists, the New World monkeys, with their prehensile tails, were considered particularly trying. Many a scientist had engaged 3 or 4 lab assistants to hold down a monkey while he administered an injections, only to have the prehensile tail rip up, grasp the syringe, and fling it across the room. The theory behind primate experimentation was that these animals were closer biologically to man. In the 1950s, several laboratories even attempted experiments on gorillas, going to great trouble and expense to work with these seemingly most human of animals. However, by 1960, it had been demonstrated that of the apes, the chimpanzee was biochemically more like man than the gorilla, on the basis of similarity to man. The choice of laboratory animals is often surprising. For example, the hamster is preferred for immunological and cancer studies, since his responses are so similar to man's, while for studies of the heart and circulations, the pig is considered most like man. Stone put his hands back on the controls, moving them gently. Through the glass, they saw the black metal fingers move to the far wall of the adjoining room, where several caged lab animals were kept, separated from the room by hinged airtight doors. The wall reminded Hall oddly of an automat. The mechanical hands opened one door and removed a rat in its cage, brought it into the room, and set it down next to the capsule. The rat looked around the room, sniffed the air, and made some stretching movements with its neck. A moment later, it flopped over onto its side, kicked once, and was still. It had happened with astonishing speed. Hall could hardly believe it had happened at all. "My God," Stone said. "What a time course." "That will make it difficult," Levitt said. Burton said, "We can try tracers." "Yes. We'll have to use tracers on it," Stone said. "How fast are our scans?" "Milliseconds, if necessary." "It will be necessary." "Try the recess," Burton said. "You'll want a post on it anyway." Stone directed the mechanical hands back to the wall, opening another door and withdrawing a cage containing a large brown adult rhesus monkey. The monkey screeched as it was lifted and banged against the bars of its cage. Then it died after flinging one hand to its chest, with a look of startled surprise. Stone shook his head. "Well, at least we know it's still biologically active. Whatever killed everyone in Piedmont is still there and still as potent as ever." He sighed. "If potent is the word." Levitt said, "We'd better start a scan of the capsule." "I'll take these dead animals," Burton said, "and run the initial vector studies. Then I'll autopsy them." Stone worked the mechanical hands once more. He picked up the cage that held the rat and monkey and set them on a rubber conveyor belt at the rear of the room. Then he pressed a button on the control console marked Autopsy. The conveyor belt began to move. Burton left the room, walking down the corridor to the autopsy room, knowing that the conveyor belt made to carry materials from one lab to another would have automatically delivered the cages. Stone said to Hall, "You're the practicing physician among us. I'm afraid you've got a rather tough job right now." "Pediatricians and geriatrists." "Exactly. See what you can do about them. They're both in our miscellaneous room. The room we built precisely for unusual circumstances like this. There's a computer link up there that should help you. The technicians will show you how it works. 4. Miscellaneous. Hall opened the door marked Miscellaneous, thinking to himself that his job was indeed miscellaneous. Keeping alive an old man and a tiny infant, both of them vital to the project, and both of them no doubt difficult to manage. He found himself in another small room similar to the control room he had just left. This one also had a glass window, looking inward to a central room. In the room were 2 beds, and on the beds, Peter Jackson and the infant. But the incredible thing was the suits. Standing upright in the room were 4 clear plastic inflated suits in the shape of men. From each suit, a tunnel ran back to the wall. Obviously, one would have to crawl down the tunnel and then stand up inside the suit. Then one could work with the patients inside the room. The girl who was to be his assistant was working in the room, bent over the computer console. She introduced herself as Karen Anson and explains the workings of the computer. This is just one substation of the wildfire computer on the first level, she said. There are 30 substations throughout the laboratory, all plugging into the computer. 30 different people can work at once. Hall nodded. Time sharing was a concept he understood. He knew that as many as 200 people had been able to use the same computer at once. The principle was that computers operated very swiftly, in fractions of a second, while people operated slowly in seconds or minutes. One person using a computer was inefficient, because it took several minutes to punch in instructions, while the computer sat around idle, waiting. Once instructions were fed in, the computer answered almost instantaneously. This meant that a computer was really working, and by permitting a number of people to ask questions of the computer simultaneously, you could keep the machine more continuously in operation. If the computer is really backed up, the technician said, there may be a delay of 1 or 2 seconds before you get your answer, but usually it's immediate. What we are using here is the Medcom program. Do you know it? Hall shook his head. It's a medical data analyzer, she said. You feed in information and it will diagnose the patients and tell you what to do next for therapy or to confirm the diagnosis. Sounds very convenient. It's fast, she said. All our lab studies are done by automated machines, so we can have complex diagnosis in a matter of minutes. Hall looked through the glass at the 2 patients. What's been done on them so far? Nothing. At level 1, they were started on intravenous infusions. Plasma for Peter Jackson, dextrose and water for the baby. They both seem well hydrated now, and in no distress. Jackson is still unconscious. He has no pupillary signs, but is unresponsive and looks anemic. Hall nodded. The labs here can do everything. Everything. Even assays for adrenal hormones and things like partial lipoplastin times. Every known medical test is possible. Alright, we'd better get started. She turned on the computer. This is how you order laboratory tests, she said. Use the light pen here and check off the tests you want. Just touch the pen to the screen. She handed him a small pen light and pushed the start button. The screen glowed. Mecom program, lab analysis, CKJCG 1223098, blood, protein, counts PRPZ, LEB, retic grab, plates, fibrin, WBC, total, fraction, different hematocrit, hemoglobin, indice MCV, MS, protein pit, C rate, chemistry, bro, cal, Cl, Mg, PO4, K, Na, CO2. Diagnostics, cholest, grade, glucose, PBI, BEI, IBC, NPN, BUN, blue diff, cephaloc, thermal, tub, BSP. Enzymes, atherase, cholesterase, lipase, phosphatase, acid, alkaline, FDHC, GOT, CGPT, steroids, LDO, L7OH, I7KS, ACTH, VITS, A, LB, CEK, pulmonary, TVC, TV, IC, IRV, ERV, MBC, urine, SPGR, pH, prot, group, ketone, all electrolytes, all steroids, all inorganics, capthacrils, prohithrins, Urabel, 5-HIA. Hall stared at the list. He touched the tests he wanted with a pen light. They disappeared from the screen. He ordered 15 or 20, then stepped back. The screen went blank for a moment, and then the following appeared. Test ordered will require for each subject: 20 cc whole blood, LOCC oxalated blood, L2 cc saturated blood, 15 cc urine. The technician said, "I'll draw the bloods if you want to do physicals. Have you been in one of these rooms before?" Hall shook his head. "It's quite simple, really. We crawl through the tunnels into the suits. The tunnel is then sealed off behind us." "Oh, why?" "In case something happens to one of us. In case the coverings of the suit is broken. The integrity of the surface is ruptured, as the protocol says. In that case, bacteria could spread back through the tunnel to the outside. So we are sealed off." "Yes. We get air from a separate system. You can see the thin lines coming in over there. But essentially, you're isolated from everything when you're in that suit. I don't think you need to worry, though. The only way you might possibly break your suit is to cut it with a scalpel. And the gloves are triple thickness to prevent just such an occurrence." She showed him how to crawl through, and then, imitating her, he stood up inside the plastic suit. He felt like some kind of giant reptile, moving cumbersomely about, dragging his tunnel like a thick tail behind him. After a moment, there was a hiss. His suit was being sealed off. Then another hiss, and the air turned cold as the special line began to feed air into him. The technician gave him his examining instruments, while she drew blood from the child. Taking it from a scalp vein, Hall turned his attention to Peter Jackson, an old man and pale, anemia, also thin. First thought, cancer. Second thought, tuberculosis, alcoholisms, some other chronic process, and unconscious. He ran through the differential in his mind, from epilepsy to hypoglycemic, shock to stroke. Hall later stated that he felt foolish when the computer provided him with a different differential, complete with probabilities of diagnosis. He was not at all at that time aware of the skill of the computer, the quality of its program. He checked Jackson's blood pressure. It was low, 85/50. Pulse fast at 110. Temperature, 97.8. Respirations, 30 and deep. He went over the body systematically, beginning with the head and working down. When he produced pain by pressing on the nerve through the supraorbital notch, just below the eyebrow, the man grimaced and moved his arms to push Hall away. Perhaps he was not unconscious after all. Perhaps just stuporous. Hall shook him. Mr. Jackson, Mr. Jackson. The man made no response. And then, slowly, he seemed to revive. Hall shouted his name in his ear and shook him hard. Peter Jackson opened his eyes, just for a moment, and said, "Go away." Hall continued to shake him, but Jackson relaxed, going limp, his body slipping back to its unresponsive state. Hall gave up, returning to his physical examination. The lungs were clear, and the heart seemed normal. There was some tenseness of the abdomen, and Jackson retched once, bringing up some bloody, drooling material. Quickly, Hall did a basalite test for blood. It was positive. He did a rectal exam and tested the stool. It was also positive for blood. He turned to the technician, who had drawn all the bloods and was feeding the tubes into the computer analysis apparatus in one corner. "We've got a GI bleeder here," he said. "How soon will the results be back?" She pointed to a TV screen mounted near the ceiling. "The lab reports are flashed back as soon as they come in. They are displayed there, and on the console in the other room. The easy ones come back first. We should have hematocrit in 2 minutes." Hall waited. The screen glowed, the letters printed out. Jackson, Peter. Laboratory analysis. Test, normal value. Hematocrit, 38/54, 21. "Half normal," Hall said. He slapped an oxygen mask on Jackson's face, fixed the straps, and said, "We'll need at least 4 units, plus 2 of plasma. I'll order them to start as soon as possible." She went to phone the blood bank on level 2 and asked them to hurry on the requisition. Meantime, Hall turned his attention to the child. It had been a long time since he had examined an infant, and he had forgotten how difficult it could be. Every time he tried to look at the eyes, the child shut them tightly. Every time he looked down the throat, the child closed his mouth. Every time he tried to listen to the heart, the child shrieked, obscuring all sounds, all heart sounds. Yet he persisted, remembering what Stone had said. These two people, dissimilar though they were, nonetheless represented the only survivors of Piedmont. Somehow they had managed to beat the disease. That was a link between the two. Between the shriveled old man vomiting blood and the pink young child, howling and screaming. At first glance, they were as different as possible. They were at opposite ends of the spectrum, sharing nothing in common. And yet, there must be something in common. It took Hall half an hour to finish his examinations of the child. At the end of that time, he was forced to conclude that the infant was, to his exam, perfectly normal. Totally normal. Nothing the least bit unusual about him, except that somehow he had survived. 15. Main control. Stone sat with Leavitt in the main control room, looking into the inner room with the capsule. Though cramped, main control was complex and expensive. It had cost $2 million, the most costly single room in the wildfire installation. But it was vital to the functioning of the entire laboratory. Main control served as the first step in scientific examination of the capsule. Its chief function was detection. The room was geared to detect and isolate microorganisms, according to the life analysis protocol. There were three main steps in the wildfire program: detections, characterization, and control. First, the organisms had to be found. Then it had to be studied and understood. Only then could ways be sought to control it. Main control was set up to find the organisms. Leavitt and Stone sat side by side in front of the banks of controls and dials. Stone operated the mechanical hands, while Leavitt manipulated the microscope's apparatus. Naturally, it was impossible to enter the room with the capsule and examine it directly. Robot-controlled microscopes with viewing screens in the control room would accomplish this for them. An early question had been whether to utilize television or some kind of direct visual link-up. Television was cheaper and more easily set up. TV image intensifiers were already in use for electron microscopes, X-ray machines, and other devices. However, the wildfire group finally decided that a TV screen was too imprecise for their needs. Even a double-scan camera, which transmitted twice as many lines as the usual TV and gave better image resolution, would be insufficient. In the end, the group chose a fiber optic system, in which a light image was transmitted directly through a snake-like bundle of glass fibers, and then displayed on the viewers. This gave a clear, sharp image. Stone positioned the capsule and pressed the appropriate controls. A black box moved down from the ceiling and began to scan the capsule surface. The two men watched the viewer's screens. "Start with 5 power," Stone said. "Leavitt set the controls." They watched as the viewer automatically moved around the capsule, focusing on the surface of the metal. They watched one complete scan, then shifted up to 20 power magnification. A 20 power scan took much longer, since the field of view was smaller. They still saw nothing on the surface. No punctures, no indentations, nothing that looks like a small growth of any kind. "Let's go to 100, Stone said. Leavitt adjusted the controls and sat back. They were beginning what they knew would be a long and tedious search. Probably they would find nothing. Soon they would examine the interior of the capsule. They might find something there, or they might not. In either case, they would take samples for analysis, plating out the scrapings and swabs onto growth media. Leavitt glanced from the viewing screens to look into the room. The viewer, suspended from the ceiling by a complex arrangement of rods and wires, was automatically moving in slow circles around the capsule. He looked back to the screens. There were 3 screens in main control, and all showed exactly the same field of view. In theory, they could use 3 viewers projecting onto the 3 screens and cover the capsule in 1/3 the time. But they did not want to do that, at least not now. Both men knew that their interest and attention would fatigue as the day wore on, no matter how hard they tried. They could not remain alert all the time. But if 2 men watched the same image, there was less chance of missing something. The surface area of the cone-shaped capsule, 37 inches long and a foot in diameter at the base, was just over 650 square inches. 3 scans at 520 and 100 power took them slightly more than 2 hours. At the end of the 3rd scan, Stone said, "I suppose we ought to proceed with a 440 scan as well. But I am tempted to go directly to a scan of the interior. If we find nothing, we can come back outside and do a 440. "I agree. "All right," Stone said. "Start with 5 on the inside." Leavitt worked the controls. This time, it could not be done automatically. The viewer was programmed to follow the contours of any regularly shaped object, such as a cube, a sphere, or a cone. But it could not probe the interior of the capsule without directions. Leavitt set the lenses at 5 diameters and switched the remote viewer to manual control. Then he directed it down into the scoop opening of the capsule. Stone, watching the screen, said, "More light." Leavitt made adjustments. 5 additional remote lights came down from the ceiling and clicked on, shining into the scoop. Better? Fine. Watching his own screen, Leavitt began to move the remote viewer. It took several minutes before he could do it smoothly. It was difficult to coordinate, rather like trying to write while you watch in a mirror. But soon he was scanning smoothly. The 5-power scan took 20 minutes. They found nothing except a small indentation the size of a pencil point At Stone's suggestion, when they began the 20 power scan, they started with the indentation. Immediately, they saw it. A tiny black fleck of jagged material, no larger than a grain of sand. There seemed to be bits of green mixed in with the black. Neither man reacted, though Levitt later recalled that he was trembling with excitement. I kept thinking, if this is it, if it's really something new, some brand new form of life. However, all he said was, "Interesting." "We'd better complete the scan at 20 power," Stone said. He was working to keep his voice calm, but it was clear that he was excited too. Levitt wanted to examine the fleck at higher power immediately, but he understood what Stone was saying. They could not afford to jump to conclusions. Any conclusions. Their only hope was to be grindingly interminably thorough. They had to proceed methodically, to assure themselves at every point that they had overlooked nothing. Otherwise, they could pursue a course of investigation for hours or days, only to find it ended nowhere. That they had made a mistake, misjudged the evidence, and wasted time. So Levitt did a complete scan of the interior at 20 power. He paused, once or twice, when they thought they saw other patches of green, and marked down the coordinates, so they could find the areas later, under higher magnification. Half an hour passed before Stone announced he was satisfied with the 20 power scan. They took a break for caffeine, swallowing 2 pills with water. The team had agreed earlier that amphetamines should not be used except in times of serious emergencies. They were stocked in the level 5 pharmacy, but for routine purposes, caffeine was preferred. The aftertaste of the caffeine pill was sour in his mouth as Levitt clicked in the 100 power lenses and began the third scan. As before, they started with the indentation and the small black fleck they had noted earlier. It was disappointing. At higher magnifications, it appeared no different from their earlier views, only larger. They could see, however, that it was an irregular piece of material, dull, looking like rock, and they could see there were definitely flecks of green mined on the jagged surface of the material. "What do you make of it?" Stone said. "If that's the object the capsule collided with," Levitt said, "it was either moving with great speed, or else it is very heavy, because it's not big enough to knock the satellite out of orbit otherwise. I agree. And yet it did not make a very deep indentation, suggesting..." Stone shrugged, suggesting that it was either not responsible for the orbital change, or that it has some elastic properties we don't yet know about. "What do you think of the green?" Stone grinned. "You won't trap me yet. I am curious, nothing more." Levitt chuckled and continued the scan. Both men now felt elated and inwardly certain of their discovery. They checked the other areas where they had noted green, and confirmed the presence of the patches at higher magnification. But the others' patches looked different from the green on the rock. For one thing, they were larger and seemed somehow more luminous. For another, the borders of the patches seemed quite regular and rounded, like small drops of green paint spattered on the inside of the capsule, Stone said. I hope that's not what it is. We could probe, Stone said. Let's wait for 4:40. Stone agreed. By now, they had been scanning the capsule for nearly 4 hours, but neither man felt tired. They watched closely as the viewing screens blurred for a moment, the lenses shifting. When the screens came back into focus, they were looking at the indentations, and the black fleck was the green with the green areas. At this magnification, the surface irregularities of the rock were striking. It was like a miniature planet with jagged peaks and sharp valleys. It occurred to Leavitt that this was exactly what they were looking at. A minute complete planet with its life forms intact. But he shook his head, dismissing the thought from his mind. Impossible. Stone said, if that's a meteor, it's damned funny looking. What bothers you? That left border over there. Stone pointed to the screen. The surface of the stone. If it is stone, it is rough everywhere, except on that left border, where it is smooth and rather straight, like an artificial surface. Stone sighed. If I keep looking at it, he said, I might start to think so. Let's see those other patches of green. Leavitt set the coordinates and focused the viewer. A new image appeared on the screens. This time it was a close-up of one of the green patches. Under high magnification, the borders could be seen clearly. They were not smooth, but slightly notched. They looked almost like a gear from the inside of a watch. I'll be damned, Leavitt said. It's not paint. That notching is too regular. As they watched, it happened. The green spot turned purple for a fraction of a second, less than the blink of an eye. Then it turned green once more. Did you see that? I saw it. You didn't change the lighting? No, didn't touch it. A moment later, it happened again. Green, a flash of purple, green again. Amazing. This may be... And then, as they watched, the spot turned purple and remained purple. The notches disappeared. The spot had enlarged slightly, filling in the V-shaped gaps. It was now a complete circle. It became green once more. It's growing, Stone said. They worked swiftly. The movie cameras were brought down, recording from 5 angles at 96 frames per second. Another time-lapse camera clicked off, frames at half-second intervals. Leavitt also brought down 2 more remote cameras and set them at different angles from the original camera. In main control, all 3 screens displayed different views of the green spot. Can we get more power? More magnifications? Stone said. No. You remember, we decided 440 was the top. Stone swore. To obtain higher magnifications, they would have to go to a separate room, or else use the electron microscopes. In either case, it would take time. Levitt said, "Shall we start culture and isolation?" "Yes, might as well." Levitt turned the viewers back down to 20 power. They could now see that there were 4 areas of interest, 3 isolated green patches, and the rock with its indentation. On the control console, he pressed a button marked Culture, and a tray at the side of the room slid out, revealing stacks of circular plastic-covered Petri dishes. Inside each dish was a thin layer of growth medium. The Wildfire Project employed almost every known growth medium. The media were jellied compounds containing various nutrients on which bacteria would feed and multiply, along with the usual laboratory standbys: horse and sheep blood agar, chocolate agar, simplex, saborad's medium. There were 30 diagnostic media containing various sugars and minerals. Then there were 43 specialized culture media, including those for growth of tubercular bacilli and unusual fungi, as well as the highly experimental media designated by numbers ME997, ME423, MEA12, and so on. With the tray of media was a batch of sterile swabs. Using the mechanical hands, Stone picked up the swabs singly and touched them to the capsule surface, then to the media. Leavitt punched data into the computer so that they would know later where each swab had been taken. In this manner, they swabbed the outer surface of the entire capsule and went to the interior. Very carefully, using high viewer magnification, Stone took scrapings from the green spots and transferred them to the different media. Finally, he used fine forceps to pick up the rock and move it intact to a clean glass dish. The whole process took better than 2 hours. At the end of that time, Levitt punched through the MaxCult computer program. This program automatically instructed the machine in the handling of the hundreds of petri dishes they had collected. Some would be stored at room temperature and pressure, with normal Earth atmosphere. Others would be subject to heat and cold, high pressure and vacuum, low oxygen and high oxygen, light and dark. Assigning their plates to the various culture boxes was a job that would take a man days to work out. The computer could do it in seconds. When the program was running, Stone placed the stacks of petri dishes on the conveyor belt. They washed as the dishes moved off the culture boxes. There was nothing further they could do except wait 24 to 48 hours to see what grew out. Meantime, Stone said, "We can begin analysis of this piece of rock, if it actually is rock." "How are you with an EM?" "Rusty," Levitt said. He had not used an electron microscope for nearly a year. "Then I'll prepare the specimen. We'll also want mass spectrometry done. That's all computerized. But before we do that, Ought to go to a higher power. What's the highest light magnification we can get in morphology? 1,000 diameters. Then let's do that first. Punch the rock through the morphology. Levitt looked down at the console and pressed morphology. Stone's mechanical hands placed the glass dish with the rock onto the conveyor belt. They looked at the wall clock behind them. It showed 1100 hours. They had been working for 11 straight hours. So far, Stone said, so good. Levitt grinned and crossed his fingers.